starting in the 8th minute with Tottenham somewhat luckily getting beyond Arsenal's press, typically building up in this 2-4 shape, with Suominen more often playing as the CDM and Kit Graham being able to push up into more of a number 8 position similar to Thomas. Despite Kim Little and Alessio Russo trying to block off the central space where Suominen was, Suominen constantly sought to try and slip them, pushing slightly into each of these channels such that Bartrup or Turner, the centre-backs, could slide past into her. If Suominen could beat that initial press, then they could create a transition such as this. Alternatively, from the centre-backs, Tottenham could spray a ball out towards Neville, the right-back who was pushing higher on the right-hand side, so that she could combine with Bizet and the number 8 being Marta Thomas or Kit Graham on this right-hand side. Unfortunately, with Naz as the centre forward or the focal point, Tottenham, even with those transitions, possibly due to those transitions, often sought to play long into those channels for Jess Naz to try and chase, which tended to cause turnovers and Arsenal regains. Note Tottenham here in what should be a 2-3 shape, although Marta Thomas is still deeper from the earlier part of this phase of play. We've got Grace Clinton narrowing to play a more creative role as she did throughout the game, creating space for Nilden to be able to overlap by that wide left-hand side. Unfortunately, as with most of Tottenham's attacks till roughly the 60th or 70th minute when they made the subs, they really lacked an edge despite all the great running Jess Naz did. Similar to Tottenham, Arsenal also set up in this 2-4 shape, although their centre-backs typically split a lot more than the Tottenham ones. And so after the defence and Zinsberger create a sense of control in Arsenal's favour with this deep possession, Arsenal flex into more of a 3-1 shape with Valti pushing out to a left centre-back position. So we can see that 3-1 a little bit better here against Tottenham's 4-4-2. The 3-1 allowing Codina and Leah Walti to easily be able to get around the Tottenham centre forwards who were trying to defend this central space. He also allowed the Arsenal fullbacks in McCabe and Catley to be able to push up in those wide spaces beyond the Tottenham wide midfielders, gaining a positional advantage. I quite like this phase of play because whilst it started as that 3-1, very quickly it morphs because Pelova is free to break from her centre defensive midfield position to push up in a synchronised way with the runs also made by Kim Little and Beth Mead. Essentially, they end up with these runs as Pelova joins in with a 4 versus a 3 of Tottenham. Alternatively, the Arsenal wide midfielders such as Beth Mead could position narrow. More often, this seemed to occur with Food and Catley, allowing Catley to be able to push really high up into a crossing position as Ford's narrow position forced Ashley Neville to stay narrow, creating the space for Catley. Okay, so from Arsenal's throw-in, they use Russo and later Blackstenius as the focal point, allowing Arsenal to set back up into that 2-2 or 2-3 midfield. Here with McCabe bolstering the midfield, whereas later in the game, both Arsenal fullback pushed really high rather than support the midfielders of Leowalti and Cooney Cross. As with the Arsenal throw-ins, Russo could provide a focal point during open play, where she could drop off the back line and then switch play out wide as an Arsenal defender, here a centre-back tracks her, forcing the rest of the back line typically to narrow, creating that space out wide. Skipping ahead to the 74th minute, where both teams have made several substitutions, Tottenham here having just regained possession, try and repeat patterns from earlier in the game when they had Jess Naz leading the line, looking to immediately play forward, try and counter-attack, although now with Beth England or Grace Clinton here leading the line. But of course, Arsenal's counter-press puts a stop to that. Even with the personnel changes, I would still say that Tottenham did still build up in that 2-4 or 2-3 versus Arsenal's 4-4-2. However, Spurs' fullbacks, Nilden and Petzelberger, were in possession now by the positioning of Artinen and Drew Spence, who would drop into those fullback positions. This freed up both the fullbacks to be able to push up higher. It allowed the wide midfielders, Grace Clinton, Bizet, to be able to roam more and play a more creative role. With Grace Clinton being able to float inside as she did earlier, helped by the number 8s, Marta Thomas and Kit Graham, now Drew Spence, we see that freed up Nilden to be able to push higher up, but then also it disorganises Arsenal's press. So we see some of that here with Nilden now being confronted by Beth Mead, with Grace Clinton in quite a bit of space. Speaking of flexibility, you can also see Suominen, who earlier was really fixed as the number 6, now being able to roam higher up the pitch. All this fluidity by the Tottenham midfield helped them to be able to pass around the corner more, do wall passes, and get the ball into that space behind the Arsenal midfield, which happened on several occasions. Unfortunately, Clinton's dribble was denied here. The ball breaks to Drew Spence, and she seeks to play the ball early for Bizet and Beth England, who've both narrowed to the near side, again going towards the fact that your wide midfielders are free to roam. Unfortunately, Arsenal not able to defend this. Lastly, despite Arsenal having several corner kicks in the first half, Becky Spencer sought to create counters from the Arsenal set pieces, such as corner kicks and free kicks, only in the late second half. So recently, I was asked about Bjorn at Chelsea and what I thought about her performances, and so as I like to do IRL, I'm going to go on a wild tangent and try and explain how I would approach such a question. So for me, defending is broken down into the macro and the micro. Macro defending for me includes firstly team selection. So for example here, playing Codina versus Williamson, or playing Pelova versus Cooney-Cross. Each player brings their own strengths and weaknesses defensively. Next, going back to the 82nd minute where Tottenham got 2 yellow cards, another aspect of macro defending for me is whether your team is playing home or away, because of all the factors tied up in that. So for example, the home team tends to have a greater onus to attack. Of course, that leaves you potentially more vulnerable, but then counteracting that is the fact that referees tend to be more biased in favour of home teams, etc, etc. Next is game management and rest defense. I include these two together because they're both means of creating control. Here, with regards to game management, Arsenal aren't resting on their laurels, being 1-0 ahead. Instead, they're pushing the attack, they're preventing Tottenham's substitutions from being able to push for a point. And then with regards to that rest defense, we can see here how the Arsenal midfield are positioned to cover for the fact that we have both our fullbacks high up the pitch. And then lastly, I'll talk about the tactical formation and scouting. Of course, certain tactical formations have strengths and weaknesses versus others, goes without saying. And of course, scouting. So knowing what strengths certain players have, such as getting forward is an absolute menace with a dribbling ability. You want to double up against her, etc, etc. On macro defending, I believe that most of defending is actually macro defending. This is why I think top teams can get away with playing non-defenders in defensive positions, such as Catley at left back for Arsenal, Daly at left back for England, etc. Also, I think it's why it's quite difficult to measure what makes a top defender or a top defensive unit, because it doesn't always tend to shake out by looking at what would seem to be the obvious metrics, such as tackles, defensive headers, etc. Micro defending for me involves firstly positional intelligence, i.e. knowing where a player should be positioned consistently. Next, situational intelligence, i.e. rapidly being able to assess an opponent and teammates' strengths and weaknesses to pick the best outcome. For example, here, doubling up against Russo off this throw-in, given we know just how good Russo is at being able to spin a marker. Next, consistency. The best defenders, regardless of the opponent or situation, i.e. the game state, must perform. There are no off days. Next, communication. Efficient defensive communication across the whole team. They need to be able to communicate positional issues, priorities, etc. at pace. For example, here, the Tottenham midfield need to be in good communication with the defenders, given they have limited to no information directly about the positioning of the Arsenal forwards. And then lastly, agility and proprioception, i.e. the ability to correctly position your body, your shoulders and your hips so as to entice the attacker in the direction you as the defender want. So here with Nilden, we've got our shoulders and our legs pointed towards the dead ball line. We've positioned slightly higher up the pitch to try and prevent an easy pass inside, because we want to create a duel with Beth Mead towards the dead ball line. Of course, this run inside also is to prevent Beth Mead being able to cut inside and take a shot, which she does love to do. And with that, thanks for watching. If there's anything you think I've missed about defending, please let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, share it on social media, subscribe and smash the like button. With that, we're out.